13th Art Life Lecture here at the library. This is a production of the Arts Council. I'm a volunteer on the Village of Mamaroneck Arts Council. Our mission is to bring the arts to the village and to also support the artists within our community, which Christina is within our community. We organize the summer concerts on the Sound in July. We do poetry live with the high school students over at the Emlyn Theater. We created a sculpture garden in front of the police station, right across the street from the library, the mural on Center Ave, and many other projects. Our next event is the Arts and Crafts Fair held here on December 1st from 10 to 4 p.m. Our next lecture is December 9th, and it's going to be an interactive dance program, which will be really great. So you're welcome to attend that. I also was speaking to the Emlyn Theater. They have a concert here at 4 p.m. that you're all welcome to go over. There's many tickets available if you want to join. It's a classical concert, a quartet. So it's my great pleasure to welcome Christina. Christina Baal is an artist, birder, and naturalist who earned her BA in studio art from Bard College in 2014. She's also a graduate of Mamaroneck High School. After graduation, she set out to fulfill her dream of seeing and drawing each of the 10,000 species of birds in the world. Her adventures have taken her across the country, from the rocky crags of Maine to the steamy swamps of Florida, to the deserts of New Mexico and the Pacific Ocean along Pacific Highway 1. Along the way, she has met hundreds of birds and countless people who share her fascination with the winged creatures and defy geographic as well as cultural boundaries. When I first met Christina here, she talked about how amazing it is that she's just done so much through birding, and that's what she's hoping to share with you. So please welcome Christina Baal.
All right, thank you, Jackie. Hey everybody, I'm so excited to be talking to you today. Usually I have to run around trying to get people to listen to me talk about birds, but this is great. You've all just come here on your own free will and you have to listen to me for at least an hour, so I'm very excited about that. I have a little bit of a cold. One thing I've learned in birding is that if you plan anything, you're kind of in denial. So if you just can't hear me at any point, just let me know. But yes, I'm very happy I made it. It's all going to be great. And here I have my biggest, bestest, most wild bird stories to tell you, because I'm not just an artist, I'm also a rabid birder. I've loved animals since I was a little kid. I've loved drawing animals since I was a little kid, and for me, the arts and the natural world, they go hand in hand. I couldn't imagine one without the other. So like Jackie said, I have a very ambitious goal. I would like to see and then paint 10,000 different species of birds over my lifetime. And I will get into the reasons as to why as soon as we start. So this here is just a sampling of some of the birds I've painted so far. I've painted about 300, and as of September 15th, I have seen 1,008. Wow. So I'm really close, really close. It's moments away. Okay, so like I said, I've loved drawing and painting birds ever since I was a kid. I have here to present to you my first ever bird book I did in first grade in Mr. Drack's class when I was 6. I like to point out my wonderful anatomy skills. You can see my bird in the summer is about half the size of the nest of the tree. Really had it going for me then. I seem to get it more correct in the first one, but I was 6. I forgive myself. At age 24, I had a little bit better grasp of anatomy, and we have an American robin here. But I do feel like it's this wonderful thing that even when I was 6, I had an idea of what was really important to me, and then years later, I had still kept up with that, and I still felt that way, so that I could immediately launch into doing in my adult life what I had wanted to do when I was a child. There was not really much separation. It was just a matter of, oh look, now your birds are not 1/3 the size of the tree. They're actually sitting in the tree. This is my beautiful 4-page story about robins and their behavior and their natural history throughout the year. Nice, very consistent. Consistency is great. So when I was younger, I got a lot of my experience looking at animals and through books. I lived here at the library. I always went right to the animal section, and my mom here would take out bags and bags filled with the animal books. We would just shovel them out, bring them back in a couple weeks, shovel out more. Lots and lots of books with animals. We'd also walk around. My grandparents would take me to Harbor Island. We'd look at ducks. We would go down to the marshlands, all these places, we'd look at animals. And it was really fun, but there was this piece where I would look at these books, and there's these really, really amazing things but I could only copy them. It was not like I was actually seeing them for myself. It was more of a vicarious experience until I went to Bard College. And let me tell you, Bard is up there in the Hudson Valley. It is the land of crazy thinkers and passionate people. Everyone at Bard College belongs there because they're kind of crazy about something, didn't fit in high school, and wants to tell everybody there what they're passionate about. So you can wake up one morning and have a conversation with someone like me who only wants to talk about birds, someone who only wants to talk about their viola playing, and another person who only wants to talk about how they want to save something in some country somewhere, I don't even know. It's amazing, it's great. And so when I was there, I had this great class, and it was not even, people don't even believe me when I tell them it was a class, because I was getting credit for canoeing with my professor in the Tivoli Bays. So I was canoeing for credit, and my professor, who had just begun to bird, was trying to show me this little guy here, right here, called the yellow warbler, and I was trying not to crash us into the rocks because I wanted to get a good grade and not sink my professor. So I was not able to find the yellow warbler. However, I did not crash us though, so I did pass. It was great. So after I went back to my room and I looked up in a field guide what a yellow warbler actually was, because I never heard of such a thing before that day, I look and I see that there's this beautiful, tiny, yellow, sunny, beautiful thing with these red streaks on its chest and a beautiful little song that exists in the world, and I had been completely oblivious to for my entire life. And it just made me start to realize in that instant, wow, I can't believe this thing exists, and I had no idea. And then I started to flip through that book, and I realized, oh my goodness, there are a lot of things in here that are really beautiful, and I had absolutely no idea exist. And I was at Bard, we were in this rural area. I decided to take it upon myself to then go try to find every single other bird. And it was great. So yellow warbler started it all. So I realized that I was getting myself into a rather large, ambitious project because I soon quickly found out that there are 10,000 different species of birds. And this is just a little bit of factual information for you all. There are 10,000 modern species of birds. They're organized into 171 different families. So you got your penguins, your rails, your hummingbirds, your owls, your vultures. They're on all 7 continents. No matter where you go in the world, there are birds. So if you want to see every bird, you have to go all over the world. It's not you can just sit around in New York and be, okay, done. You got to do some pretty crazy stuff, which I'll get into. And it's very crazy. It's great. The cool thing about all these birds is that they actually all evolved from one ancestor. You can go see its lithograph in the museum. Archaeopteryx was the original bird. And from there, we have all these different birds that have adapted all kinds of different skills and behaviors and feather formations so that they can survive and thrive in every possible corner of this planet. And I've actually seen all of these birds. They were very, very cool. Okay. So the next thing I learned after I discovered that there were quite a few birds I would have to find is that birds actually have an entire culture around them. And I don't know what you might have heard about birders or people who look at birds. There's a lot of different things. So some people tell me that birders are crazy, and I will say you are absolutely correct. We are absolutely insane, some of us. Some people think we're dorks. Some people say it's nerdy. Some people think it's for old people with the vests and the hats on their safaris. Some people think it's for the people in the labs with their, fancy lab equipment. I will tell you that all of that's true, but oh my gosh, it's so much better than that. You have no idea. It's amazing. So I started out as a baby birder, which meant that I would drag my sorry butt out of bed at 5 in the morning to fumble my way down to my professor to go birding, and she would show me birds. I would be half asleep, and suddenly I'd be seeing these warblers and owls and raptors. And suddenly I realized, oh my, I'm now waking up at 4. I don't socialize with my friends anymore. This is actually getting to be pretty all-consuming. So just in case any of you were interested in birding or looking at birds, I wanted to just sort of give you a heads up as to some things you might want to expect in your birder development. I start my little scale here. I call this the scale of birder development, with what I call a casual birder. And a casual birder wakes up between 7 and 9 a.m., maybe the time that most people wake up for work or whatever other things you might do on a regular day. You might leave the house for 1 to 3 hours, maybe get some lunch in between, You just basically drive around town to local places, and you maybe have 1 to 5 bird books around your house that you're using to sort of introduce yourself to different kinds of birds and maybe things you might see in your local area. But as you do this, you might suddenly find that you are starting to become addicted. And you'll know that you've reached the stage when you wake up and suddenly it's dark outside, it's 5 a.m., the rest of your family is sleeping, you have to start cutting your social engagement shorter in the evenings because you have to be able to wake up that early. You usually stay out for 4 to 8 hours, so your day is pretty much shot. You suddenly go traveling to other states. You might actually plan your trips around birding, so vacations are no longer sitting and reading in the sun. They are trying to find that really rare Kirtland's warbler that is only in this one state, and the rest of your family wonders what on earth you are doing. You also start to realize that bird books are maybe taking over your life. There might be some on multiple surfaces. You might have complaints like, why is this bird book still in the bathroom? It's not the same one, it's a new one. I finished the other one. Yes, and then we get to what I call the rabid stage, which is where I currently am and will probably be for the rest of my life, and where a lot of my friends are. So rabid birders might wake up before 4:30 because you need to do something called owling, which is where you blast a owl call out of your car stereo into the night to see if owls will respond to you and therefore count owls before the sun comes up, and then you begin birding. Oftentimes rabid birders will then owl again after the daylight is gone, and you start the whole process over. Some birders don't really sleep ever. You may find that you no longer have a social life. You are dangerously close to getting fired from work, and you don't even eat very often. I find that a lot of birders forget to eat when they're birding because they're just so focused on seeing things. So you have to watch your health. And then you suddenly find that you are traveling worldwide because local and state is just not enough anymore. And you can basically make furniture out of your bird books. I once was able to construct a desk to draw on because I had enough stacks where I could make a 2x4 surface, so then they become helpful in other ways. So yes, it's a really great system of development here. And if you would like to actually see how this in action, there's this really great movie called The Big Year, where you can actually watch this guy decide to dedicate his entire life to watching and looking for birds across the country. And you will see that I'm not making this up. This is a real thing. Like, there's a movie about it with actual famous actors. I think that's Jack Black and the Pink Panther guy. I know a little bit of culture, but not much of it's not related to birds. Okay. Anyway.
Owen Wilson.
Owen Wilson, yes, I remember now. Thank you. Owen Wilson. See, famous people, you know them. Okay, so it didn't take me long to discover that I was becoming a crazy rabid birder. I started to do things like climb 4 mountains in a day to find this big-nelled thrush up in the Catskills. I heard about a vagrant sandhill crane in Ulster County while I was at the Bard and thought it would be a really smart idea to bike 40 miles round trip in 97-degree heat to go find it, which I did. And I only minorly passed out on the bridge back on the way home, but then I got an ice cream shake and it was all okay. I then got really competitive. Birding can be competitive. There is a website called ebird.org where you can input your bird findings, but you can also see other people's bird findings. And I was in tough competition with this woman in Dutchess County who was always one bird ahead of me and my professor for the entire year. So over the summer, I was trying to get ahead of her, and I decided to look up where her latest bird sighting has been. And she reported a cliff swallow in this random rural area over in Pine Plains, which is about 40 miles from where I was. So I jumped on my bike, biked 40 miles. I was pretty tired, actually. Got to the place, and I'm looking in this, it was exactly the coordinates, all right? I knew it was exactly those coordinates. I'm looking into this yard and realizing, oh my God, this woman trespassed to find this cliff swallow because this is private property. I mean, I can't do that. That's just going too far. I'm not going to get arrested for birding, not for a cliff swallow anyway. So I'm sitting back at home later that night just kind of really upset about this because I really wanted that bird and I was very tired after biking 80 miles in one day. And I sit bolt upright and I realize, oh my God, I've become such a rabid birder that I followed those coordinates and I found that woman's house. Oh. And this woman still does not know this, though I know her in person now. Yes, birding's pretty good. I then also had this really great experience where I was with my professor, who is also, as you may have guessed by now, very crazy as well. And we were kayaking in a thunderstorm looking for these Virginia rails, which we did find, and it was very cool, and no one got electrocuted. So it was a very exciting adventure. And by the end of that semester, I was fully rabid. I then took one final fatal step in becoming a rabid birder. I read this book, Kingbird Highway, by a big bird person, Ken Kaufman. He is a very well-renowned birder. He does work up at Black Swan Bird Observatory. I met him. He wore this amazing blue tuxedo with flamingos on it to our prom event, which I will tell you about soon. So just keep that in mind. And he wrote this book about his big year that he did when he was 16. He was 16. He was young, regardless, and he hitchhiked around the country for an entire calendar year trying to see as many birds as he could in North America. And he did it on less than $1,000. And there were points when he was eating cat food. So regardless, after I read this, I thought to myself, wow, this is such a doable thing. You could totally go do this. And that was that. So after that, I thought to myself, okay, Ken Kaufman did his big year back in the day when there was no eBird, no smartphones, and he wanted to see all the birds in North America. I want to see all the birds of the world. So I am going to see and draw 10,000 different species of birds. And because I'm just that masochistic, I decided I could only draw it after I've actually met it myself so I could see its personality and get to know it in a very, unique way. Which basically means I'll be doing this until the moment I die, which is great. It just means, I have a lot of work to do. And it makes a difference. There have been points now where I've gone to hold birds and band birds, and I've gone some crazy places. I've seen some amazing things. And it really does make a difference to actually see a bird in real life as opposed to in a book or on a documentary. And while those things are amazing and are so helpful in order to see things that might otherwise be out of reach, even if you just walk outside your door and you look at a bird that's sitting there, it just really changes everything. Because you can see the little light in its eyes, and you can see the way its feathers fluff up and its little personality, and you realize that they're just like people. They're unique and they're wonderful. And trying to paint that is what really helped develop this particular art style I have. Back when I was in college, I had thought that I really wanted to do mostly illustration. I wanted to draw as lifelike as I possibly could. Since Bard is a hippy-dippy place, they told me that no, illustration doesn't count as art, and if you continue to do this, you won't pass. So I was like, all right, we need a new plan. So I had a professor who really pushed me to try to paint the way the birds are making me feel, as opposed to just painting the bird itself. And at first I thought, this is crazy. I don't know how to do this. This is never going to work. It turns out that professor was right, and it actually is the reason that I now have art that has sort of taken me places, and I'm talking to you all today. So I put up these 3 different images here to sort of show what I mean about this illustration versus my bird art. When I first started, I wanted to try to draw something like that picture up there of these beautiful sandhill cranes, exactly like that, detail for detail. I then tried to draw it a little bit more realistic. I tried to let go a little bit more, but it wasn't until I really just sort of let go and tried to paint my own experience from actually watching them myself that I actually started to see these stories come out in these paintings. And I put up this example here. These are these sandhill cranes. I watched them in Wyoming, and while I was in Wyoming, they were dancing. And let me tell you, sandhill cranes, you might have seen them at the zoo. They have beautiful dances, but they're also goofy dances. I mean, they're like, meh, and it's just really hilarious. And it's just a wonderfully uplifting thing to watch. And when I tried to paint that uplifting feeling, that emotion of watching these birds dance, that's when I realized, okay, this is actually what I want to do. I want to be an artist, but more than that, I really want to be a storyteller. And I want to be able to tell the stories of these birds so that people can meet them and be inspired to go see them too. You guys have this painting. All right, so
privilege.
So I just put up a couple pictures of a work in progress. When I paint, people ask me, do you have a studio I can come visit? And I tell them, well, but I love how you're laughing because this is funny. My studio space is a little corner of the living room that's about this big with a shower curtain that I'm quarantined to, and I'm not allowed to cross the border of that shower curtain because then I might get stuff on the floor and I'll be murdered and it'll be bad. So I have my shower curtain, that's my studio. I got a bunch of spray bottles from Walmart that I fill with this awesome liquid watercolor that I get from Michael. So this is like low budget art, anybody can do it. And some brushes, and I pretty much dance around my paper, moving around, blowing things, squirting things, adding some lines, get up, go eat a sandwich, come back, do this some more. And that's how the art happens. And it really is just sort of this, I found that you kind of have to let things happen. And I think birding was a very good way to help me let go in art, because in birding you can control nothing. You go expecting to see something and you see something else, or you see nothing, and it's never under your control. So when I paint with watercolor, especially liquid watercolor, I've learned to realize that there are many, many moments when everything is completely out of my control. So I will often have an image in mind, I will try to add some detail, I then add a lot of color, I just let it flow, I blow it around, I use a hairdryer, and as the color starts to move and evolve, I kind of notice what other things start to take shape. Like I noticed here when I was doing this that these bison sort of came out of the fact that there just wasn't any ink there. So I added the dark. And then all these other animals sort of came up out of the spaces where the water and the ink did not flow. I didn't really plan them. It was sort of like a filling in as the art went along. And I call this experiential art because it is sort of a full body experience where no matter what idea I have at the beginning, it almost always looks different because of my mood, or because of the way I move, or because of the way the paint moves. And I think that's just very, very analogous to the actual experience of watching the natural world. So I think it fits well. And this is what the finished thing ended up looking like. In the end, I do take some artistic control at the very end and add in some details, regardless of what the paint wants me to do, so I can really show each species as it is and make sure it's recognizable so that its story can be told. This is a piece I did after I went to the Oklahoma prairie. Oops, okay. So, I put these pictures here. These are pictures of 6 specific birds. There's an osprey, a California condor, red knots in the Delaware Bay, painted bunting, great gray owl, and a sandhill crane. And I put these here because I just wanted to show you, I take my own photos to use as reference photos, so I've taken all these photos. When I actually start to compose an image, I will look at my reference photos and I will only use them to really bring out the anatomical details of the species. What I do when I'm composing a picture is I will just try to draw the experience of seeing it, which means it often just looks like a lot of circles and rectangles and lines. But if you can see these pictures here, these photographs were the details that I used to then turn these experiences into these very, very different images. But this is the painted bunting, a little beautiful, colorful one. The red knots became this. California condor became the beautiful, colorful rainbow bird down there. Those are my sandhill cranes. The osprey just burst to life as it hit the water. And then the great gray owl became this very foreboding thing coming out of a dark sunset. As I remembered them, because these obviously look very different than the pictures. Combination of experience, emotion, movement, and especially seeing the bird. That's so important. Have to see the bird. Okay, now I'm here to convince you that you all want to become birders. I'm going to take one sip of this because this is the good part. Okay, so despite what you may think, birds will actually make you friends. If you go to parties and talk about birds, you probably will get some funny looks at first, but let me tell you, birds have given me the best party stories you could ever imagine. So, after I first read Ken Kaufman's book, that's the one where he goes around the country eating cat food, I got into my head that it'd be a really great idea to go to my first ever bird festival, which is basically like, how should I put this? It is like a Super Bowl party for birders. Bird festivals, they're held all around the country. Everybody there speaks bird. Everybody's there to spend money on bird things, wake up at the crack of dawn and go see birds together. It's awesome. So I decided to go to my first bird festival in Florida. And I thought, if Ken Kaufman could do all that, I can just pack a backpack, get off the plane, I'll stealth camp behind the college where the festival's being held, everything will be great. So, get off the plane, go behind the college, everything's going to plan, I find this nice little palm tree I can sleep under. But for all of Google Maps technology, the one thing that they forgot to remind me about was that there are alligators in this park. There's no Google Maps option that tells you there is an alligator near your campsite. Maybe sleep somewhere else. So I'm standing there looking at this alligator and going, you know what? Ken Kaufman didn't really talk about these things in his book. And you know what? I might be a little bit out of my league here. So, hyperventilating just a smidge, because my sleeping plan was now totally off, and I didn't quite know what I was going to do with myself. I ran into the college. I had just come from college. I had just graduated. Demanded to speak to an advisor. Asked for some advice. This really nice advisor, who could see that I was mildly worried, was very kind and drove me to a COA campground after work, 9 miles away, where I, slept through the night, and by the night I mean until 2:22 in the morning when the hot Florida humidity condensed and drenched me. I then decided to start my 7-mile walk to my first field trip, which was going along great, aside from the fact that I was carrying everything I needed, and it was, I was pretty tired and I was pretty wet. And then a cop car comes up and tells me that there have been reports of a suspicious-looking individual. And I'm standing there with my backpack and the camera that's the size of a blackjack and my binoculars. I'm thinking, who, me? Can't possibly be me. Oh, maybe it is me. Oh, I guess I can see how if you're not a birder, this looks really bad. So I hand him my license. And I'm standing there going, all right, this is going to be great. My mother's going to love this one. And he asked me, what are you doing? And I tell him, I'm here for a bird festival. I'm walking to my first field trip because there were alligators where I was going to sleep. And I don't know if he thought I was just, deranged or whatever. He put me in the back of his cop car. I'm thinking, all right, I get to see the inside of a cop car. This is great. And he actually drove me to the Cracker Barrel where we were all meeting for our first field trip. I was the first person in there online to get some breakfast, and I was ready to go at 6 a.m. for the first field trip. I did not get arrested. Did not get arrested. So that was really great. And then I learned that birders are actually the greatest people ever, because the people who were running that field trip, when they discovered I had no car or any kind of normal things that people usually have when they do things like this, not only drove me to Walmart to get a bicycle, they put me up in their couch for the rest of the week, and they taught me how to swing dance. And they took me birding to make sure I could see all the reddish egrets and other birds I didn't see on my trips. And everybody at the festival let me keep my backpack in their booth so I could just walk around and have fun. And my friend Raymond, the Leica guy, and this really other great bird artist, so took me in their car to the Daytona Gulf Lion, so I could see 45,000 gulls flying out over the water. It was pretty great. And I just made so many friends who were just so invested in my survival, but also just in making sure I saw all these birds. And it was just this unbelievable feeling of realizing, wow, there's this actual community of people who are just really committed to each other and want to do whatever it takes to make sure that everybody gets to see these birds. And it was a really uplifting feeling because, I don't know how many of you have had this experience where you kind of find your people. It's just that really great feeling of realizing, I found my people. That's my bike that I biked around Florida. I'm not making any of this up. Yes. So now, like 5 years later, I've gone to many, many bird festivals, and a lot of my friends are actually birders. So bird festivals, like I said, are amazing. This is my friend who runs the Space Coast Festival, the Florida one. We are now very close after that wonderful life-changing, irresponsible event. We try to have chocolate milk with each other in as many states as we can as we go to different festivals promoting our businesses. This is us in Florida having chocolate milk at her festival. There's another great festival that I like to talk about to just highlight how awesome birding is and how awesome friends it can make you. Every May, I head down to Ohio to this wonderful event called the Biggest Week in American Birding. And if you think Florida was great, this one's even better. So, and Biggest Week, there are about 10,000 people from countries all over the world. And we participate in events like a birder tattoo contest and birder karaoke, lots of rockin' robins. And at the very end of the week, there is something called birder prom, which I sort of touched on before when I said that Ken Kaufman is in attendance wearing his blue blazer with his flamingos. My friends and I decided we had to outdo Ken Kaufman and the prom king and queen from 2 years ago, who won because they actually made a dress and a vest out of birdseed bags. Like that was legit. I gave them that. That was legit. Yeah, my friends and I decided we had to outdo them this year, so we all dressed as red birds. I was this one, Andy and Cock of the Rock. I even dyed my hair red, and it was pretty great. We were the most awesome bird like there was. And birder prom is a real thing. It's really great. It's like high school prom, except instead of being the nerd in the corner, you look awesome and talk about birds, and everyone else talks about birds. So it's pretty great. Oh, and then that in the corner over there, that is Catherine Hamilton, who is like one of the greatest bird artists ever, and I know her, and she's my Facebook friend. It's really cool. Birding is great. Okay, so birds will make you friends. Birds will also take you on adventures. And when I say adventures, I mean that on two levels. One, you will suddenly walk out your door and realize that literally what is right there is the coolest thing ever. Because right outside your door, there are probably thousands of insects and mammals and plants and birds and all kinds of things that you just have no idea exist. And you can spend hours just a little plot of grass, just learning them all. So once you start looking at birds, you will suddenly find that you cannot go anywhere on time, and you cannot hold a normal conversation because every little bit of movement you'll do this, and people will get used to it and just they don't think you're rude, but it is weird at first. But then you will also realize that you can go to so many awesome places going after birds. Need to take some tea before I get into this one. So, I've lived on the East Coast my whole life. And prior to birding, I'd seen very little of the world until I got invited to go to an artist residency in Wyoming. And let me tell you, it is really different out west, especially if you drive there from New York. So my magical adventure to Wyoming started right here in Mamaroneck. I got into my car. Half an hour later, I thought I was going to die as I almost hit a falafel cart in the Bronx. I don't know why my GPS thought it was a good idea to go to the Bronx when I can really not drive very well in cities. But anyway, after I survived the harrowing adventure that was the Bronx, I found myself driving through so many states. And it was just incredible to watch the terrain turn from cities to farmland until you get to the Dakotas and it all just becomes these rolling mountains. And it's just big out there, and there's a lot of birds, and a lot of different people. And no matter what state I was in, it just amazed me to find that as long as I was going around with my binoculars, somebody would walk up to me, and we could start talking about birds in any state, like no matter what. And I realized on my Magical Adventure West, which is its official name, Magical Adventure West, that birding is this incredible universal language. And as long as you can appreciate what's around you, you can talk to anybody, anywhere about birds or whatever it is that you like. Maybe it's mammals or plants or your garden. But these kind of things that we all have in common that we can all relate to just create these bonds that I have friends all across the country just because we started to talk about birds. And that's, I think, a very magical, I say it's my magical adventure out west. I think that is actually a very magical, beautiful thing. So here I am meeting some awesome bighorn sheep in the Badlands. You can tell I was very, very excited. It declined to take a selfie with me. But this is my, the morning commute was really rough. You think I'd have trouble in the Bronx, like this is more my type of thing. Like the bison, buffalo type of traffic. That was in Yellowstone, that was pretty great. That owl there, the great gray owl, was my #1 target in the whole world at the time. So I spent 4 hours in front of a dock waiting for it to start hunting. I also met this guy who was also standing there for 4 hours in front of a dock. He worked in Yellowstone, and it was kind of nice that by the end of 4 hours I made a friend and we shared Victory Great Gray Owl cake, and it was just a really nice evening. Aw, Thor. Yeah, so yeah, West was beautiful. And then the great thing about the West was that openness and that bigness. You just kind of let loose out there. And so there's these really, I came out of it making these really big paintings that had really big spirits because that adventure, that just sort of going after it, it empowers you. And whether it's going out your door and suddenly learning what's around you, or jumping in your car and driving 3,000 miles out west, I mean, they sound very different, but they're actually not all that different. Because at the end of the day, it's that recognition and that understanding that really just changes you, and it makes the world bigger. And so birds really do lead on an adventure. And this is that moment I saw that great gray owl. Just amazing. It just flew out of the woods, and the sunsets in Yellowstone are quite beautiful. So the sky was on fire, and it just flew right at us for a quick second before going back into the woods, and it was like an unforgettable moment. All right, birds will lead to the unexpected. Sort of like me being here. Didn't quite expect this, but yet here we all are. So, here's some of my best bird stories. So last August, I just finished my summer camp job, which was great. I was pretty tired, and I got a call from one of my friends inviting me to jump in a car and drive 31 miles from Vermont to Oklahoma to drop her off at grad school. And it was pretty out of the blue, and it sounded pretty awesome. So there I jumped in the car, drove 31 miles across the country to go to Oklahoma. And we watched the eclipse, and we saw some Mississippi kites, made some pretty cool art. Did not expect that. So a couple months later, again, rather unexpectedly, I find myself jumping off a plane to help this same person with their graduate work in Texas. She was looking for these teeny tiny birds called yellow rails, which, by the way, are basically the size of like this. And most people will never even ever see one or hear one, but I got to old one, which is very cool. And I would like to just explain how you might come to hold a yellow rail. So we were banding them, which means you're putting these rings around their legs for science. So because they were in these swamps, in the middle of Texas, in the middle of the night, in the middle of mosquitoes, you needed to wear a giant headlamp and huge boots and many, many layers of clothing and so much DEET that you really couldn't breathe. And the protocol for this was to essentially gallop, just imagine a deer jumping like this, through the reeds with a giant butterfly net, trying to catch these things. I'm sorry, I should preface that. First you had to stalk through the reeds with the giant butterfly net. And then when you saw one and flushed it, then you would jump through the butterfly reed, through the reeds with the butterfly net, and hopefully catch one. And we did, and it was great. And the whole time, all I could think was, wow, my little sister would just never, ever, ever do this. Or really anybody I know. Okay, so last but not least, birds will absolutely inspire. My whole life has been changed irrevocably by birds. I've gone places I never imagined I would go. I've met people I never imagined I would meet. Last year, one of my friends helped me get to Costa Rica, so I got to leave the country, and it was awesome. So down there are birds that are just so colorful and just amazing. So we have a little snow-capped hummingbird, yellow-throated toucan, fire-throated hummingbird, resplendent quetzal. And let me tell you, that whole thing about birds being a universal language, it applies even when you cannot speak the same language. I had, in my broken Spanish, so many conversations with people across the eastern side of the country where I was visiting. We talked about our favorite birds, we talked about ecotourism, we talked about the cloud forests, and it was just unbelievable how much, like, even though our cultural differences were, crazy, and our lifestyles were so different, and our backgrounds were just so, we learned from each other. And as we talked about our favorite birds, I was talking to this little kid about the king vulture from Costa Rica, and I told him, my favorite vulture is a turkey vulture. And you could just see their faces light up with recognition. They may not know what a turkey vulture is, but they understood. Like, they understood why my favorite bird was a vulture, because they also loved their vulture. And that was a very, very powerful thing to see. And, you think there's no boundaries here in the States because of birds. Like, even across other countries and cultures and equators, birds can really just connect people. And that was amazing. And so now, there was this one artist there who actually gave me a piece of art to take back with me, a bird artist. And so I recently just finished this piece here, this bare-necked umbrella bird, for them to use as their Christmas bird count t-shirt art for this year. And I just am so incredibly moved that all these people in this other country are going to be seeing art I made from their birds that inspired me. So I like to think that across the entire world, the more relationships we can create with people through birds or the natural resources that we share, the more we'll be inspired to protect them all. Oh yeah, that was really nice. All right, so a couple more really great stories. So this June, I was able to go to Ecuador. And I would just like to say, for anybody out there who might think that they want to be an artist, you absolutely, absolutely should, because it is awesome. And if people tell you, you're not going to make any money, or you're not going to go anywhere, or you're going to live in a box, or you're going to starve, I will tell you that is only sometimes true. Realistically, yes, but whether or not I'm going places, that is absolutely not true. So I ended up in Ecuador this June for no reason other than that I met this woman who owns a birding hotel down in Ecuador, and she wanted me to make some bird art for her hotel. So we did it for trade. I made her some art, she took me down to Ecuador, and I got to see Ecuador birds. Bird art took me places, like for real, like literally took me places. Other side of the Americas. And it was really great. And while I was down there, and so I've said that vultures are my favorite bird. Vultures are awesome, just in case that was not already something you subscribe to. Vultures clean up after us. They're really great. I mean, they'll let dead stuff on the ground. They kind of take it away, and they turn it into new life. And they're really dorky, and they're really beautiful. So if you don't like vultures, we can have a talk later, and I'll make sure we see things the right way. But anyway, this is one of the king vultures, this Andean condor, which you can only see down in South America. And it's one of the birds I dreamed of seeing internationally more than any other. And I had a lot of, when I first learned about this bird, I was a senior in college, and I had a lot of foot problems that precluded me from walking, and I wasn't sure at the time if I would ever be able to see this bird. just because I wasn't sure if I'd be able to physically get to it. Regardless, as I sat there in my bed, being very stubborn and bitter and just thinking, no, I'm not going to let that stop me. I swore to myself that I would go see the Andean condor, even if I had to crawl up the Andes Mountains. And this June, because of all the experiences that birds had given to me, all the people who had helped me get to where I was able to walk up the Andes to see the Andean condor. So if there's one thing I want to say is that when it comes to birds and art, just never, ever, ever give up. Because the bird world and all these people, they will always, always help you get to where you need to go. And no one ever is going to let you fall down. So just go for it. I saw the Andean condor. It really happened. Okay, so this August was a huge, huge, huge milestone for me. After 4 years of chasing around birds after college, I think I graduated and I'd seen 255 birds. So in 4 years, on August 6th, I climbed up Mount Lemon and I saw my 1,000th bird. It was the only picture I can actually take myself of this bird. So I saw my 1,000th bird, and to me that was a really big deal because in a quest to see 10,000, that's actually 1/10. It feels like a lot. People ask me how many birds have you seen, and I tell them, well, I've actually seen 1,000. To me, it just sounds a lot heavier than I've seen like 500 or 800. I don't know if I'll ever see all 10,000 birds in the world, but the fact that I've seen 10,000 means that I've seen 10,000 different, adventures and 10,000 different 1,000 different adventures, 1,000 different places, 1,000 different people who were all involved in getting me that far. And so it was a really amazing thing. I made friends with the cactus while I was there too. And earlier this May, I got to hold the little yellow warbler that started it all, and it was a kind of magical moment to get to sort of come full circle to where I'd started and to where I've now been. And my last and best story is the best one I have, and it starts with this. This is my friend the raccoon. I met this little guy in San Francisco when I decided, sort of like I did for my Florida trip, to get on a plane with a backpack, get off the plane in San Francisco, and then just bum it for a couple of days. So I did a lot of things like sleeping in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park, which was gorgeous, and traffic really wasn't that distracting. I'd sleep fine. I then decided that I wanted to go see the biggest bird in all of North America, the California condor, which is a really, really, really special bird. So the California condor is the biggest vulture in the country, the biggest bird in the country. It's got a wingspan that's 9 feet, which is like at least 2 of me. And there are only about 450 left in the world, the entire world. And the reason for that is because as westward expansion, pushed people west, we brought our lead, we sort of we took over their environment. People just killed them because they thought they were ugly. Their populations plummeted during the late 1900s until by 1981 there were just 21 birds left in the entire world. And if you think about that, that would be as if everybody in this entire room was the last of humankind. Like that was it. That was all. So there are 21 birds left of this amazing, enormous, mighty condor. And the Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife decided that the best way to try to save them would be to bring them all into captivity. So by the 1990s, there was not a single wild California condor left. They were all in captivity, and it was in the fate of those 21 birds to see if captive breeding could bring their numbers back to the point where the species would survive. And now this was, lots of birds every day face extinction, lots of animals every day face extinction. This bird, how do we decide which birds get to be saved, which ones we lose? This bird is an icon because it was the largest vulture. It was a very important symbol to Native Americans on the Pacific West Coast. It was this big raptor. It was given a lot of people were invested in the survival of this bird. So a captive breeding program was on for a couple years. A lot of false starts, a lot of birds didn't make it, but eventually, they were able to release captive red condors into the wild. And so today, there are about 250 California condors flying free above California and Arizona. So when I went in 2016, I had about the same chance of bumping into somebody from my high school as I had of bumping into a California condor in California. There's only about probably 150 of them flying out there. So odds are pretty terrible, because as anyone who goes to Mamaroneck might know, Mamaroneck's graduating classes are like 100 people. So not great odds. But I decided I was going to try anyway. So get my backpack, jump on a bus, and by bus I mean 5 buses, busted my way down from San Francisco to Big Sur. And this was actually a logistical masterpiece because there's only one bus that goes from Monterey to Big Sur during the off season, and if you miss it on the way back, you are stranded in Big Sur for the entire week. So that wasn't going to work out. Oh, and by the way, I had to do it all by bus because even though I said that you will make money as an artist, budgets for artists aren't always great. So no Ubers, no taxis, gotta do it by bus. So take a bus down to Monterey, where I spent the night eating with this guy who decided at about 4 in the morning that it wanted to indulge itself. And so I find it going through my backpack. I wake up and I'm thinking like, oh. And then there's this big fluffy thing right next to my head, and it had literally unzipped my backpack, very politely now, and it was going through each thing. I watched it pick up my binoculars, then put them to the side. Maps, that put to the side. Oh, biscotti, I want these. So it takes off with my biscottis, goes and eats them. All right, fine, comes back, gets the bananas, whatever. About like 10 minutes to this, I decide, you know what, I'm just gonna help you out. I kind of give it the rest, move my stuff, go to the bathroom. The great part about this is when I do come back, the old spot had 4 raccoons sitting there waiting for me. It was a very rough night. Regardless, get through Monterey, get on my bus to Big Sur, get off at Big Sur. Big Sur is the northernmost point of the Condor's range. So I'd gotten just as close as I could by public transportation, and I now had 14 daylight hours between when my bus left and it would pick me up the next day to try to find this bird. So I head out down Pacific Highway 1, which if you've never walked along there before, I advise you not to. It's this wonderful little winding highway with cars, shooting by at about 60 miles an hour with the guardrail over there, a very, very long drop right there, and the Pacific Ocean battering against the wall right there. So it's a really safe place. Regardless, I was very safe. I walked along the edge, very nice. About 7 hours in, I was rather dehydrated and I was rather tired, but I finally turned this corner, and what do I see but these 2 big, giant condors sitting in this tree coming out of the edge of the wall, and I'm just beside myself with glee. And this third one flies overhead, and they used to call it the Thunderbird. Back Native Americans would call it the Thunderbird because they said its wings, the beat of its wings, actually sounded like a bolt of thunder. And as it flew overhead, I knew absolutely why they said that. Like, no exaggeration, it really did sound as though thunder were booming overhead. And I fell to my knees in the wake of this giant bird. And as I just sat there, the 2 who were on the tree there, they were actually preening each other in this very intimate, beautiful way. You could tell they were a bonded pair. And as I watched them, so beautiful, so ugly, they're ugly birds, I will give you that. But it was really achingly beautiful, the way they were just caressing each other. And it really hit me, I don't know what kind of right we had to decide whether this bird was going to live or die. And I continued to watch them, and people started to get out of their cars because even non-birders at this point realized, whoa, that is not a normal bird, that's a huge bird. So I had this little kid sitting next to me, I gave him my binoculars so he could see it better, he got all excited, whoa, this is a huge bird, this is the biggest bird, it's really cool, isn't it? I'm thinking maybe he's gonna be a birder, this is so great. All these people were getting out of the car, everyone was watching, and then eventually, I had no idea how much time had passed at this point, but the wind picks up, and so eventually one of the condors just sort of falls out of the tree, and the wind picks it up and it goes right along the guardrail. And I kid you not, you could actually see right into its big red eye that was eye level. And it was like looking into this, like, defiance. It was like looking into defiance embodied. And as it flew right by the guardrail, second condor followed, and it started to fly around and around and around the mountain pinnacles above us. Wow. And as it soared, its black wings eclipsing the sun, I looked down and I noticed that all these people were stopping their cars and getting out of them. And this is a dangerous highway to do that, by the way. So they it's a risk, but it was worth it. And it was just amazing that there are people of all shapes and colors and ages coming from who knows where, going from who knows where, who had all stopped to look at this bird. And it just hit me, this bird that we'd almost, destroyed was this thing that was bringing us all here together. And it was in that moment that I realized that, this thing that had been doomed to fall could actually be the thing that saves us all. And so the California condor was a very life-changing bird that day. And so I'd like to end my presentations by just focusing on that, the fact that birds are this thing that really can bring us together, that they have this message that transcends, what we just see on the surface. And if you just take a look outside your door and look at what's around you, there's this whole other world out there that could really change your life. And maybe you'll want to go birding. Maybe you want to make some art. Maybe you'll see condors one day. So thank you very much for listening. Here are some ways.